US and BBC One, it's off to Scotland for a heritage tour around Edinburgh in See Here.
Edinburgh really is an ancient city, and it's absolutely full of history. Edinburgh also has a lot of important deaf history here, your history. Now, I teach deaf adults local history, and a great deal of it is just around here. For example, just across the road there, before any deaf club was established here, deaf people used to meet each other on the corner outside that pub. The history of deaf people can be written in the very stones of the city, and sometimes if you want to see it, you have to look up. Now, this is a good starting point for your Deaf Heritage Trail. Now, how did a road like this get a name like that? Well, at the top of the road was the very first deaf school in the world, which was founded 200 years ago. And the children used to walk up this road signing to each other, and people called them dummies. And that's how it got the name, Dumby Dykes Road. Now, let's see what's happened to the school up there. Come on. Well, this is the top of the road, top of Dumby Dykes Road. No buildings. This is it, I can't go any further. Well, some old maps were really helpful to me in my research, and I found where the buildings were around here. And looking at them, they all had different names, of course, but there was no school marked on the map. But by sheer chance, I found an old drawing. And it was a drawing of a building called Craigside House. And on there, it said it was also known as Dumby House. And that drawing was done just before the building was demolished. Now, that really was an interesting find. So Craigside House actually was Braidwood's Academy for the Deaf and Dumb. I was really excited at finding that. So it shows that research is really worthwhile. So from that, I had to go to the library to try and find some photographs of Craigside House. And I found some. And this is all that's left, just a few stones behind me. So we found the building. Now, what about Thomas Braidwood himself? Well, he was born in 1715 near Hamilton. And he started an academy of mathematics. But how did he start teaching deaf people? Well, in 1760, a wealthy man brought his deaf and dumb son along, whose name was Charles Sheriff. And Braidwood took on the challenge of educating the boy. And looking through books, I found how Braidwood taught, what methods he used. He taught children to speak by using a silver spoon, which he bent and used to manipulate their tongue. He also used signing. And so total communication, or even bilingualism, are nothing new, really. Now, Dunby House didn't go on very long. It went on until 1783, when Thomas Braidwood moved to London because the king had offered him some money to go and do his work down there. So there was no deaf school here then. Until in 1809, a group of people decided they wanted to start a school for deaf people in the Edinburgh area. Now, how do I know that? Well, I went through the council minutes of the time, and in there was a note of a group of people asking the city fathers to provide 10 guineas so that they could set this up. Now, where do I find information like this, minutes of town council meetings? Here in this city archive, in the public search room. So this is another good place to start doing research. So this is one of the oldest standing buildings on our Deaf Heritage Trail. Because in 1810, the council fathers and other people got together the money to establish the Edinburgh Institution for the Education of the Deaf and Dumb. And in 1814, the children started using the building, which is Chesil's Court. They used it for about 9 years. But there's another link to deaf history here, because my favourite historical personage, John P. Wood, worked there as the excise man for Scotland before the children took over the building. Now this map is from 1851, the middle of the 19th century, and on there are no less than 3 centres for the deaf. Of course, deaf history is very strongly linked to schools, so this map's very useful from that point of view, just as hearing history is very strongly linked to education in Scotland. As is commonly known, James Donaldson left £250,000 to establish Donaldson's Hospital, which was actually a school for poorer children. And just before it opened, deaf and dumb children were allowed in because the constitution was changed.
Was your mother in school here as well at Donaldson's? Yeah. Do you think she'll be in the register? Do you want to have a look and see? Do you know what her own name was before she was married? No, I do. It's Mackay. So you can have a look back. Right, is she there?
Now I'm here under the watchful eye of James Donaldson himself, the founder of this school, Donaldson's College out there. And I'm looking through the old school records. Now these are very important because these show people rather than buildings, and people make communities. So all the deaf people in here form the deaf community. My name's in there, my son's names are in there, and I was surprised to see there's another John Hay in here. He was at this college. At that time it was known as Donaldson's Hospital. He was born in 1861, and he was from Wishaw, which is near Motherwell. He was born deaf and dumb, and he left school. In fact, he was expelled from the school because he wasn't very bright, poor lad. Now, these school records are really very important because they tell us what's happened in the past right up until today. But they will continue as long as this college is open. These are all people from our deaf church during the last 100 years or so, ministers and elders. Deaf clubs are very useful places for doing historical research because they're full of all kinds of documents. Now, this is Albany Street, and this is the place where I teach every week my history class to deaf adults. And that's done under the Adult Basic Education Unit for the deaf. So Matthew Robert Burns, who started this church in 1830, started a school in 1832. Now, why did he start this day school? Well, he was in opposition with Henderson Row because they'd moved to Stockbridge. So this was redesigned at this end of the church here. And the reason was that it was a problem with all these women with the huge hats. You just couldn't see over them, could you?
I see. So which school did you go to?
Well, I was at Henderson Row School. Well, what's going on here is that this gentleman is a senior member of our deaf club, and he's talking to one of our younger members. Now, her great-grandfather was the session clerk of this church, and they're sharing information together. He's passing on his history to her, and she will carry on the history of this deaf club herself. Edinburgh Deaf Club is absolutely full of fascinating documents. This one is the very first journal of the Society. It's handwritten and hand-illustrated by deaf people themselves. Now, I also have one absolutely fascinating document. It's a really tattered piece of deaf history from way back in 1830. This is it. This is a list of the people who went to the deaf church. And it's full of names, some of whom are probably well known now, and some of whom are unknown. I know some of them who became famous names abroad. For example, there's a man who went to Australia in 1858, and another one who went to Nova Scotia in 1855. And that's a really valuable piece of deaf history there. Now, I would appeal to all of you to start searching around for all documents like this. So maybe sports records, albums, scrapbooks, or whatever, and preserve them. Don't throw anything away. They must be preserved because they are your history, the history of the deaf community in your area.